We are so pleased this morning to be joined as well by Representative Zoe Lofgren from California. Congresswoman Lofgren serves on the Judiciary Committee, the Committee on Science and Technology, and the Committee on House Administration. She has written and sponsored various pieces of legislation that would promote open access to information, including the Fair Access to Science and Technology Research Act, to expedite open access to taxpayer-funded research. Lofgren received an A in the Secular Coalition's Congressional Report Card of 2013. Yeah. That she is a strong proponent of separation of religion and government. Please help me in welcoming Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren.
Well, thank you very much, and it was great to see my colleague Bobby Scott. We sit next to each other on the House Judiciary Committee, and he has been a tremendous champion of the First Amendment and separation of church and state, and we are lucky to have him in the Congress. You know, I don't know that I can replicate all that Bobby has done. I'm a strong believer in the First Amendment. As a person of faith, you have to respect people of other faiths and people who decide not to be believers. That's what our country really is about, that people can make their own choices. And I guess I'm aided in this by my district. You know, I remember years ago, a member of the House and I were talking on the floor, and I was discussing the great diversity in my district. And I pointed out to him that I had more Buddhists than Baptists in my district. And he said, well, we have diversity too. We've got Methodists and Baptists in the same town. So I do think that we have some issues when it comes to imposition of viewpoints in an inappropriate way. And I'll talk a little bit about the Science Committee, because Bobby doesn't serve on that. You know, we have had one of the most contentious sessions in the Science Committee in the history of the Science Committee. You know, looking back, I've now been in Congress for 20 years. The committee, until just recently, tended to be bipartisan. I think back to Congressman Sherry Bollard, a Republican from New York, a very even-handed individual who would pull consensus together, because science isn't about ideology. Science is about science. It's about fact-driven decision-making. Unfortunately, that has changed considerably. I think most of you know, and I'll read the quote because I don't want to get it wrong, but I remember the Science Committee said, all that stuff I was taught about evolution and embryology and the Big Bang Theory, all that is lies straight from the pit of hell. This is a member of the Science Committee. So we have had repeatedly partisan votes. When we have witnesses or hearings, most of the Republicans spend their time trying to discredit the scientists, arguing about whether it's 97% of climate scientists who say climate change is happening, or could it be 93%, and really avoiding the issue of the biggest challenge that we face in the world, which is climate change, and how to deal with this. You know, we've had, just yesterday's a great example, the energy bill that was dropped in our laps on Friday afternoon, barely meeting the notice requirements, doing huge reductions in high energy physics and in other science endeavors, and really going after anything to do with the study of climate change. You know, we're not going to have a healthy world if we don't empower and fund the scientists who are leading us away from a worldwide catastrophe. I just want to say finally that there is a ray of hope from time to time. We actually do get things done. Recently, in a markup on a bill that took us in the wrong direction and that I cannot support, we did have a little ray of hope. I am indeed a co-sponsor of the bill to open up science research to the world. We paid for it. and scientists should have access to it. That bill has not progressed, but Jim Sensenbrenner, very conservative Republican from Wisconsin, also thinks that that science research ought to be made available. And so, working with Jim and Tom Massey, who's a Tea Party Republican from Kentucky, but he's an engineer. He thinks scientists ought to have access to science information. So we were able to get that included in this bill. One of the things that I think it's important about you being here today is to make sure that the voices of really most Americans who believe that data and facts should drive the decision making get heard. It's very easy to hide behind one's beliefs, one's wishful thinking when it comes to these hard issues that we're facing, especially when climate change. Who wants to think about that? But your voices urging an analysis of facts, urging action, I think is enormously important. Just a final word on the climate change issue. This morning, we were, the Aspen Institute holds meetings frequently with speakers, and Hank Paulson, former Secretary of the Treasury, was giving a report that he's put together on the impacts of climate change. And he has done it by region in the United States with the business community, hoping to stimulate some real attention on not the long-term, but near-term impacts of climate change. And I'm hopeful that as we work with scientists, with people who want to insist on data-driven decision-making, such as yourself, people in the business community who see that action is necessary, not criticism of scientists, that we will finally be able to break through on some of this important issue. I have time for a couple of questions if you want. I see lots of hands. So if I know the answer, I'll give it to you. Yes?
Okay, so thank you so much for coming, Congresswoman. What I want to say is the last times that I've gone on these events, a lot of the people, staff people, have not even really known, have never met an atheist before, never met a person who's really interested in secular governance focus. And so are you hearing more of a buzz amongst your colleagues? I mean, it just seemed like it was zero.
Well, no, I'm not really.
Okay.
But to me, I'm not an atheist. So what? I mean, you have a right to your own beliefs, just as I have a right to mine. Whatever your belief system is, we need to be data-driven in the making of decisions in the government. And I think that rather than get in an argument with somebody about their individual, not that you would, because people have dearly held beliefs that are oftentimes contradictory to other person's beliefs. It's not necessary to have a data-driven decision-making approach to government. I have the largest Sikh temple in North America is in my district. And when we had the grand opening, 10,000 people came. The mayor of the city, myself, the governor of California. Before we were invited to speak, we had welcomings from other people of faith communities. And for the Sikhs, we had the Hindus, and we had Muslims, and we had Buddhists, and Catholics, and Baha'is. And I thought, here in California, people are welcoming to each other. Where these religions originated, there's a lot more hostility and tension. I think America can lead the way in acceptance of diversity and really understanding that diversity gives us tremendous strength. Yes, sir.
As with many movements, in the secular movement there are many groups that are a bit guarded about working with others, yet to make an impact we have to unify on some issues. What's your advice for convincing these outsider groups to join us?
Well, I don't know, what advice to give you on that point. I just think that finding common cause on a specific policy issue is usually a good way to work together. I'll give you an example on something I'm working on right now, which is NSA surveillance. I think what is going on in the surveillance of Americans violates the Constitution. The bill we passed a few weeks ago does nothing significant to address the issue. So who am I working with? I mean, some other Democrats, surely yes, but also Justin Amash, who is a very conservative Tea Party Republican, Tom Massey, a conservative Tea Party Republican. I don't agree with them on all kinds of things, but we work together on this issue. So I think finding things where you can collaborate actually helps you work on the next thing.
My name is Jason Torpey. I work closely with the military community, and I appreciate your commitment to science and having your beliefs and supporting science as well. And what would you say? It's not your district, but it's right around the corner at Lemoore, near Fresno.
Oh yes,
the Naval Air Station.
it's a very different part of California.
Very different part, yes, over the hills. So there's a Navy chaplain there for the last month or so. He's been sending messages. As the wing chaplain, he has access to do distribution to over 1,200 sailors there on the station. And he's been inviting them to Bible study so they can learn how cave drawings prove that people live with dinosaurs, that evolution has never been proven, and that it's just a theory. So, and that's been for the last month or so to 1,200 people using his official position to promote that view. Is that free exercise, or is that something that is inappropriate for a chaplain?
Well, I don't know anything other than what you've told me, and certainly constitutional rights are not exercised in the same way for members of the military as they are for civilians, and we know that. But I do think that, that's a very interesting report and probably ought to be brought to the attention of the Department of Defense, so thank you for that. Yes, sir.
There's been earlier discussion about acceptance and visibility. My question to you is, we're seeing in the atheist and the non-believer community, I don't want to say just atheists, the non-believer community, whether it's atheists, agnostics, humanists, and scientists, we're seeing examples of people who are afraid to declare themselves as non-believers because they believe there's a stigma there. I would say intellectually and socially we're roughly where the LGBT community was maybe a few decades or so ago. My question to you specifically, without naming names, is do you know fellow representatives in your own body, House of Representatives or senators, who are in fact non-believers but who are afraid to come out?
Not necessarily. I mean, to be honest, religious beliefs is not something that I tend to talk about with my colleagues in the House. That's a private matter to me, and it's not something I ever discuss with other people. What I discuss is, immigration reform and NSA surveillance and, legislative issues. So, I'm kind of a live, let live person. And I do think you're right. I mean, especially in some parts of the country, non-believers are not embraced or respected. I think that's less true, for example, in my district. And I think if you take a look at the issue of gay marriage and how quickly that went from that'll never happen to every state in the union is going to recognize gay marriage, I think that, which is great, the capacity for the American people to change is very large. And I do think that whatever people's religious beliefs are, we, as a fundamental belief system, there's a big part of America thinks, what you want to believe is your business. It's live and let live approach. That's a very strong trend in the American culture, and I think it works to the advantage of freedom. This will be my last question. I got to run back to the house.
Thank you for joining us here today. My question is regarding your efforts on the Science Committee.
Yes.
You mentioned that data and facts should drive the decision making with regards to research. How does the Science Committee ensure that the data and the facts that are presented for evidence is not junk science? Because as we know, there's many so-called scientific studies out there that are not statistically significant, have no relevance to the facts at hand. How does the Science Committee
I can't
dig
speak
out
for the Republicans because I can remember we had a hearing on on climate, and they had like an they didn't have any scientists. They have 3 witnesses, we get 1 for each panel. So we make sure that we have on the Democratic side a legitimate scientist. We also have something, I mean, the committee staff on the Democratic side are scientists. And they make use of the scientific community. If we have an issue, we have an email connection so that you can get a quick answer. It's not peer reviewed because it's on the fly, but you can get information from legit scientists who are at research institutions or at fine academic institutions. And to me, I mean, there's not always consensus, but if you follow the path that scientists do with peer review, you're going to end up with the best science possible. Now, I'll close with this. The chairman of the committee, Lamar Smith, he and I had many contentious battles when he chaired the Judiciary Committee, culminating with SOPA and the web shutdown, and now he's moved over to the Science Committee, so we get to fight again. He actually has laid out a plan where Congress will do the decision-making. Instead of peer review, you'll have political review. It's a catastrophe. Every scientific society in the country is opposed to this trend. Thank God, I think the Senate will stop it, but that's why elections do have consequences. And I hope that all of you will think about that as this year progresses with the oncoming midterm elections. With that, thank you very much for all of you.